Good evening, Namaskar.
Welcome, Swamiji.
Namaskar, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the continuation of the discussion of the Yoga Sutras. This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. If you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. If you are not speaking, please mute yourself so as to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyagena yopakrutam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam tatra sutrasya bhashyasya kramad vivaranasya cha. In fact, this sixth sutra of this Samadhipada that gives a list of the fivefold vrittis, it is very significant because vrittis and samskaras are two unique concepts from Yoga Sutra literature toward psychology. I mean, the idea that whatever we do with full awareness or consciousness will create an impact, a residual effect called vritti, and it remains deposited somewhere. Of course, there was always a vague understanding of this process in psychology, but this elaborate description of this and how these vrittis and samskaras later determine, define and influence our actions and behaviors and thoughts. That description, that link is a unique contribution. See, pramana vipirre vigalpa nidra smrtayaka. The pramana we can understand. Pramana here, any vritti, any tendency, any impression that is created by a conscious recognition or experience of something, and recognized through any of the valid tools of knowledge. Either it could be seeing directly, experiencing directly, or it could be gust. It was a guesswork, an inference, or it could also be some kind of a coming to a conclusion through analogy, comparison, or maybe you may have read somewhere, Shabda Pramana. So all these pramanas. And also an extension of this inference, or maybe it may be awareness of absence of something. All these are understandable because this is how modern psychology tries to understand the impact of our experiences on the mental system. But the other aspects, for viparya, vigalpa, nidra, smrtayaka, the remaining four aspects. Viparya, as I mentioned, viparya is viparyu mithya jnana mata dhruva pradishtham. That means it is false knowledge of something. It is knowledge, but that knowledge doesn't correspond to the real thing, but it may be a misconception. That misconception also remains latent in the mental system and can become a samskara and can cause sankalpa and eventually can influence our action, karma. And again, more vrittis, identical vrittis can be formed, so the same vritti gets reinforced, becoming a solid block of habits or tendencies. Then again, Shabda Jnananubadi Vastu Shunya Vikalpa. Well, you hear a sound or you infer from something, but then it is obviously unreal. That is Vikalpa. I mean, for example, this sort of give the example Gandharva Nagara, a city in the sky, or it could be anything that you hear and immediately you understand it is not real. That's the idea behind. So all these can remain in the mental system and can influence our action. Then Nidra, that is a 10th sutra, Abhava Pratyalambana Vrittihi, Nidra. That is what we had to discuss today, the 10th sutra, Abhava Pratyalambana. What is Nidra here? You have to remember the Nidra, the word Nidra used here is a little different from its counterpart in Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, where Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, the three states are analyzed in texts like Mandukya Karika, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, in the Chandogya Upanishad, in Yoga Vasishtha, and in many of these books, this state of Sushupti, deep sleep, dreamless sleep or deep sleep, is analyzed. But the word Nidra, when used as one of the fivefold vrittis, it belongs to a different category. So I shall try to explain this. In the Patanjali Yoga Sutra tradition, it is knowledge without awareness of that knowledge. We come to know of things, but we are not aware of the fact that we are knowing it when we are knowing it. You can see that some of the experiments made in educational psychology. Children who are very poor in cognitive powers, when they are not in dream state, but not in waking state, not deep sleep either, but in some kind of a sleep condition, when lessons are played out to them, children sometimes remember. Because when the mind reaches a state when it is not connected to external things, then it perceives and recognizes things. That's how memory works better in that state. That particular condition is the implication of the word Nidra, sleep, in this 10th sutra. People should not mistake this Nidra to that state called Sushupti in Advaita Vedanta. That would be wrong, because in Sushupti there is neither knowledge nor awareness. But in this Nidra, there is knowledge but not aware. There is no awareness. Now, how deep sleep influences our life? Apart from the restfulness we experience, in some state of sleep, we may hear a sound, and that sound sometimes goes very strong in the mental system. Of course, in the mythological Pauranic books, you come across such events, that is, I am not questioning. But in modern psychology also, there are being experiments when children who were in a state of sleep, when music or some lessons were played out loudly, and they cognized it. The memory remains there, which means there is knowledge. But when they are experiencing it, they are not aware of it. They become aware of it when they come out of sleep. That's why this great Vyasa, he says, Tasma Pratyaya Vishesho Nidra. That is Vyasa's take, his own take on this particular sutra. Sukham Aham Aswapsam. He quotes this from the Vedanta scriptures. Then Vyasa, of course, he interprets it differently from Vedantic scripture. He says, Tasmat pratyaya visesho nidra. Pratyaya means knowledge here. Pratyaya visesha means pratyaya alone. Pratyaya excluding everything else. Pratyaya means knowledge. When we talk about knowledge, we also talk about awareness. It is the awareness element that actually helps us to remember that we have known certain things. When you study a book, when you learn it, but if you are not aware of what you are learning, then that knowledge remains there, but then you may not be aware of it. Many of us are not aware of what we actually know. We need an external agency to remind us of what we know. So Vyasa has got this comment he make. Tasmat pratyaya visesho nidra. Knowledge is there, but awareness of that knowledge is not there at that time. So that's why it is called a vritti, because a vritti is formed, and vritti is invariable when there is knowledge. The vritti gets reinforced when awareness comes later. So that is the significance of the 10th Sutra. Of course, in the commentaries and elsewhere, you can find many insights as to how and why these vrittis later go deeper and deeper and become instincts and conscious actions. They express as instincts and they also express as conscious activities. So when it becomes an instinct, it becomes mechanical, effortless, spontaneous. When there is awareness, consciousness at the time of recognizing the previous vrittis, then of course it strengthens and reinforces the previous vrittis. The 11th sutra is Anubhuti Vishaya Apramoshaha Smriti. So what is Smriti? Smriti is also a memory. Of course, in Vedantic tradition, every dream and every remembrance are more or less identical in Advaita Vedanta psychology, but not in Patanjali system. In Patanjali system, Smriti and Nidra are two different entities. So what is Smriti? Memory when it is not losing the object once experienced. So it is called the asampramosha. Neither going up nor coming down. When we won't allow an experience to slip away into the unconscious state. That is asampramosha. So, we experience something and that memory is not slipping into unconscious state. When it becomes an unconscious, a part of unconscious state, then that memory can influence instincts. Instincts are unconscious activities. We do things spontaneously without using our cognitive power at the time of doing it. Mechanical habits. But here what happens is this memory remains fresh. It doesn't go into the deeper layers of the mental system. It doesn't slip into the unconscious level or even subconscious level. When we remember always. That is Smriti. So that is the definition of Smriti. So these are the five-fold vrittis according to Patanjali's system. And this is the foundation of the cycle called Vritti Samskara Chakram. Chakram means wheel or cycle. Vritti these fivefold vrittis, by the pratyaksha, anumana, etc. Pradvani, pramana. Then viparya, then vikalpa, nidra, smriti. All these are five vrittis. Pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, shabda. All these pramanas can create pramana vritti. Then viparya. Like, for example, mistaking a conch shell for a piece of silver on the seashore. There is an external resemblance, but we know that it is different and distinct from real silver. That is viparya. Again, we hear certain things and immediately we know it is not real. That is vikalpa. Nidra is a state of mind when it is not in sushupti, nor in dream, nor in waking state. In dream, you cannot accumulate a fresh vritti of another experience, except what you are dreaming. But still, the mind during these intervals can accumulate new vrittis, that is nidra, as smriti. Now, in the 12th sutra, a new subject is introduced. How to restrain, how to control these vrittis. Yogaha chitta vritti nirodha. That is the definition. What is yoga? Yoga is nothing but this art of or science of going beyond or transcending vrittis, simply speaking, which means transcending this wheel of actions, their memories, their impressions, their repeated actions, their influence, their impact on the mind. All these should be transcended. We should be able to go beyond them, and that is nirodha. When you reach that state, first we attain samprajnata samadhi, and then we attain later asamprajnata samadhi. That is vritti nirodha. So how to do this? That's the first step. The 11th sutra tells you abhyasa vairagyabhyam tat nirodha. It means how to remain unaffected by vrittis. Detachment is one, dispassion, detachment, and of course continued practice of this dispassion and detachment. So attachment is really only at the mental level. The remedy is this attachment should be loosened through dispassion, through the counterpart, that is detachment. So that is the way to vritti nirodha. Now here, of course, we should remember the purpose of yoga practice is to go beyond karmic blocks. That's a term used in many books these days. Of course, you know. Karma vritti, the karma vritti samskara chakram is sometimes called by this karmic block. Karmic blocks can express and manifest in so many different ways. So many manifestations. Obsessions, obsessive habits, instinctive habits, mechanical actions without being aware of what we are doing at that moment. But when we try to get out of it, we feel great discomfort. You can see people who are advanced in years. They will, especially those who have practiced a lot of discipline, mechanical discipline in their life, when they are advanced in years. Suppose you go to an aged person's room and try to misplace a book, take a book from his table and put it differently. The aged person can feel terribly disturbed. Actually, if you take one book from one shelf to another shelf, nothing is really going to happen. But that a karmic block is there, these habits, so it creates a great discomfort, a great pain. So the aged person will tell you, no, you should do that way. No, you should put the book exactly where it was kept. He may not be reading it. This could happen. So what I mean to say, certain vrittis which manifest as strong obsessive habits. Vyasa has given a very, very interesting description of how positive and negative vrittis are created. Our actions, conscious actions especially, can directly create a vritti. Unconscious actions also can create a vritti, as even nidra, it's true, it happens. Where there is knowledge is there but not awareness, it also can create vrittis. So how vrittis can be classified into two categories, the positive and negative. So Vyasa says, Chittanadi nama ubhayatapovahini vahati kalyanaya vahati papaya cha. Vyasa writes, Chittam, the mind is compared to a river. And this river flows in both the directions. Kalyanaya vahati means it flows towards good actions, good results, positivity, so to speak. That's the language used in modern times. The mind flows towards positive and also towards negative. Papaya cha. When mind flows into a wrong direction, it creates what we normally call negativity. That's what we call it means. Now, yatu kaivalya pragbhara viveka vishenimna sa kalyana vaka means that flow which is towards good, it flows towards liberation. Let us say our mind, vrittis, tendencies, congratulate you. Suppose you are going to a good library to read a good book. The mind, all right, go ahead, your mind tells you. Mind is very friendly, enthusiastic. Or any kind of activity when you contemplate. Going to pray in a place of worship, listen to something that is really useful in our life, that's really beneficial in our life. Immediately the mind cooperates, mind is friendly with you. That means mind is at that time is called Kalyanaya Vakati, means it is flowing, is moving towards positive tendencies. And of course, Vyasa says, Kaivalya Vagbhara, Viveka Vishay Nimna, Sa Kalyana Vaka. Means, then that flow towards good, it is going in the direction of discerning wisdom. It will be beneficial. So it will be Kalyana Vaka. It will be beneficial. Anything, any action, or when you decide to do something, when our mind immediately cooperates, you are lucky. That means your mind is friendly with you. But mind is not always like that. Samsara pragbhara aviveka vishay nimna papavakha tatra vairagyena vishesotaka khili kriyate vegadasana abhyasena vivekasotaka udghadide. That is Vyasa in his Vyasa Bhashya. So he says, the flow, there is another flow, that flow towards worldliness. You say, when you feel, of course this happens when people feel when they are going to indulge in some worldly activities, which of course will be only harmful, can only produce harmful results. If the mind is reluctant, then you are lucky because your mind is itself giving a red signal, don't go in that direction. That's because you have deposited a lot of positive tendencies in your own mental system. The bank balance of positive tendencies is good. That's why you feel reluctant. Mind itself resists. When a person finds it very difficult to tell a lie or to steal something, first time criminals, sometimes. That's because they have a lot of good positive tendencies, but some negative also. So they very reluctantly, with great reluctance, they do something that's harmful. That's because of positive tendencies, which are still present in the mental system. But if the negative tendencies are overwhelming or they're dominating the mental system, then the thought of doing something that is really harmful to us and harmful to others, when that thought emerges, the mind will be happy when such a man's mind suddenly projects a very negative thought. He will be happy because of the overwhelming percentage of negative tendencies, wrong vrittis, wrong samskaras. There's a very unique analysis of the mental system. Then we call positivity, negativity, and so on. People sometimes say negativity and positivity are things coming from outside. They are all within our own mental system. And there's a way out to get out of negative tendencies. There's a way out of our own inner negativity. When sometimes we have to compel ourselves to do something good. No, today I will go to a temple or a place of worship or place of prayer, church or whatever may be. Any kind of activity. That will put a little small deposit of positivity in our own mental system. It is within our power. If we do that, slowly the mind will cooperate much more easily when we try to do something good. That's why Vyasa says, samsara pragbhara aviveka vishay nimna papavaha tatra vairagyena vishay srotaka vilikriyade viveka darsana abhyasena viveka srotaka udgatite. So what happens is, when we practice this dispassion, discriminative wisdom and detachment, then what happens? Vairagya should be understood. A natural tendency to give up or to move away from negativity. That is vairagya in real life. And you practice this again and again, repeatedly. That is abhyasa. So abhyasa vairagyabhyam tad nirodhaka. So how to block and get out of the negative way of karma vritti samsara chakram. That is discussed here very, very elaborately. The question arises, how to begin a beginning, how to introduce ourselves into this process. There, in some of the commentaries, you see, we should sometimes use force upon ourselves. If our mind is not always willing to cooperate when we try to do something positive, then we must use our own power of determination. And once we use it a few times, then you won't have to compel your own mind to do the right thing and to speak the right word, to think the right thought. The beginning, one may have to struggle a little. That's why when a person is trying to meditate for the first time in his or her life, you feel like running away from your meditation room. You feel like if an impulse to go and open the TV or whatever it is. Immediately after meditation, after you feel like go and reading, that is something that is just entertainment, which may not be always beneficial. It could be even be harmful sometimes. That's because mind is fighting with us, fighting with you. Mind is not cooperating when you try to do something good. So you feel like running and getting out of the seat where you're sitting for meditation. Or when you're reading a very wonderful book, if your mental system is not always willing to cooperate, we feel like stopping reading that book and start reading something maybe rotten. So that's how Vyasa gives a very wonderful analysis of mind, which he compares to a river of thought processes, mainstream consciousness. But unlike modern psychology, he says mind is flowing in both directions. We can move in the positive direction if we want, or we may move in the negative direction. We cannot stand still. That's an important thing to remember. Mind never remains neutral unless you reach this vritti nirodha. So mind remaining still and quiet without a single thought, that is a very high state of yoga practice. For a beginner, it doesn't happen. Unless you give some good food to the mind will start eating poisonous food and it will fall sick. That's an important point. And so the mind, Chitta Nadi, that's why we are Chitta Nadi Nama Ubhaya Tapo Vahini Vakati. Kalyanaya Vakati, Papaya Cha Vakati. The Vyasa statement. That is, the river of mind, thought currents, they flow in both directions, towards good and also towards bad. If you don't deliberately make an effort to move in the right direction, then the force of the current will move us in the negative direction. That's why when the river is flowing, when the currents are very strong, you cannot remain still. So when you want to move in the right direction, sometimes you have to struggle hard. You need to be an expert swimmer because you have to face the pressure of water flowing in the opposite direction when you want to swim up front. So this is an important thing. So that's why a beginner in spiritual life feels conflicts. Conflicts only show that you are actually making progress. That's an important thing. Just like when you're climbing a hill for the first time, if you feel pain on the knees, it means your knees are getting exercise. They are getting strengthened. And if you practice this rock climbing or maybe climbing a hill every day, then the knees will not protest. They get accustomed to it because they develop strong muscles. Like that, in spiritual life also. So one important warning that Vyasa implies here is, we should not ever imagine that we can stand in the middle of the river of mind. If we don't make a deliberate effort to move in the right direction, slowly we will be moving in the wrong direction. That's an important point, remember. After saying this, where of course Vyasa says, Tatra sthidau yatnaha abhyasa. So what is abhyasa? That is defined here. Abhyasa. Tatra sthidau. Now, we have to practice this, and then what we should do, this practice is, the abhyasa is the effort to attain a steady state of mind. Continued practice. It may be not just in one life, it may take several life cycles. But still what happens is, we should not stop. And there is an important point to remember, we should always, especially in modern times, especially when we discuss these, especially these abhyasa vairagya abhyam tat nirodha. An important point to remember is that Yoga Sutras can be properly understood and appreciated only if we recognize the reality of multiple birth cycles. That means reincarnation or rebirth, and of course the doctrine of the law of karma. So these are two foundational principles which form the key to understanding Yoga Sutra literature. Because otherwise people who are very enthusiastic, who may not have always understood the importance of recognizing reincarnation and multiple life cycles, they think, oh, I have to start immediately without wasting time. This is an important point. You can often hear where in Olympics or in soccer tournaments, when one world soccer power, football superpower is defeated badly in the finals, that day they may dismiss the manager and they may start taking steps to have new coaches and new managers to give fresh training to the team, because 4 years later there will be another World Cup and they will make a strong determination to win the next cup, because they won't waste time. But you find in Oriental countries, they won't bother much. So you can see how this belief in multiple life cycles instinctively influence nations and cultures, not only individuals and families. So it can, if you don't believe in multiple life cycles, then it can perhaps promote efficiency, promptness in execution of your duties and responsibilities. It may be possible, but remember, yoga is a different field. Suppose now I want to achieve abhyasa and vairagya quickly, as quickly as possible, the result is total disaster, because we should not and we cannot play with our own mind. Mind will retaliate. So mind should be handled properly. So that's why abhyasa is very important. Repeated practices. And repeated practices should be understood not in one life cycle, but in several life cycles. If you find some persons can easily feel at home in spiritual ideas, Vedantic ideas, in spirit, let us say in higher doctrines, it's because that person may have already done a lot of practice in his previous life. So it's not a new field for him. But that may not be true for everyone. There may be people for whom it's a new experience, new practice. So we should always remember, we should be slow and we should be cautious and we should take proper precaution. We should not overdo things. So that's an important point. Remember, you can find in the Gita and elsewhere, Arjuna asked this question to Lord Krishna. In the 6th chapter, maybe 36th verse, Aidi Shraddhayo Pedo Yoga Chalita Manasaha Aprapa Yoga Samsiddhim Kam Gadim Krishna Gechari. Arjuna, perhaps forgetting the fact that things don't happen in just one life cycle, he's asking the question. Suppose somebody who is trying to practice yoga. Yoga here means spiritual life in general, not necessarily Ashtanga Yoga. That's what Arjuna implies here. Somebody who is trying to live a spiritual life makes very hard efforts. Sincerity is there, honesty is there, real desire to live a spiritual life, all there, but still may not succeed. Does it mean that all efforts are gone? That could be a problem sometimes, because then you feel, could have done business. Instead of doing business, I spend my time in meditation, reading, practicing higher disciplines. I could have started a business made a lot of money. So I neither succeeded in spiritual life, I did not get enlightenment, and of course I did not succeed in making a lot of money. So everything is gone. That feeling can come certain to people. That's what Arjuna is asking. Ayadi Shraddhayo Pedo Yoga Chalida Manasaka Aprapi Yoga Samsiddhim Kam Kadim Krishna Gechadi Kachinno Ubhaya Vibhrashtaka Chinna Prabhivanashyadi Apradishto Mahabahu Vimudho Brahmanapadi. He says, so I will have lost both the worlds if I don't attain spiritual liberation, spiritual enlightenment in one life. I've lost both. Krishna tells no. It's not like that. You won't lose anything because based on what you have done in your previous life, you'll be born in a family, in a set of circumstances where on the strength of what you have already acquired in your previous life, you will be able to make further progress. So whatever you have accomplished, achieved in one life will remain with you. And that's because of the vritti aspect, vritti samskara. Positive vrittis, positive samskaras will create a huge bank balance, and that would be in our name. And then Lord Krishna says in the same chapter, Purvabhyasena tenaiva kriyadehi avashopi sakha jignasupi yogasya sabda brahmadi vartade. He says, Purvabhyasena tenaiva means on the strength of practices done in previous life. You will be born maybe in a set of circumstances where spiritual life will be relatively easy for you. So don't feel that you will lose anything. That's an important point to remember. In spiritual life, we don't lose anything, unlike in business. In business, if the stocks collapse, you may lose everything. Everything can go, and then you have to live on food stamps. Maybe the county may provide you a cheap residential facility. You may start being a billionaire, trillionaire, and everything can collapse. It could happen. It did happen many times. But in spiritual life, the banks don't collapse. The stock markets do not fluctuate in spiritual life. They are steady all the time. So what it means is, whatever we achieve in one life, whatever little practice we do, maybe that's the only thing you are going to take home when you leave this world. That's an important thing. In fact, there are many verses in the Vedanta Hindu tradition where it says, when a person dies, he doesn't take away with him his near and dear ones. He doesn't take with him the checkbooks and fountain pens, and doesn't take with him the key that opens the safe. No. But he takes away with him even if he doesn't want to take away. That is his own karmas. Karmas means his actions and their results. That he has to take with him, whether he likes it or not. There is absolutely no other option, no choice in this matter. So that's why Lord Krishna says, Purvabhyasena tenaiva. Purvabhyasa means you have already done a lot of spiritual practice. Abhyasa. In Purva Janma, I mean previous life. On the strength of that, you will be born, you will be rewarded, and the reward is being born in a set of circumstances where you will be able to continue your journey from where you have left in the previous life. And that is a very unique, important point to remember. Of course, there are reports that a large number of people, a very huge percentage of people in modern times, modern Western world, do believe in some kind of a reincarnation, though they may not publicly admit it, but it is reported in many surveys that there is an increasing percentage of people who do actually believe in, of course, in reincarnations. Anyway, that's a different subject. The next sutra actually gives a key as to how and why we should practice this abhyasa and vairagya. And that is Satu Dirghakala Nairandarya Satkara Asevido Dudabhumi. Now, how to practice this abhyasa and vairagya? So, Satkara means Adradisheha means. So, Shankaracharya says, in his Vivarana, he has written a book called Bhashya Vivarana. It's based on Vyasa's commentary. Means Adradisheha Tena Saha. Means, when you practice this discipline, discerning wisdom, detachment towards worldly things, and this strong sense of respect towards spiritual ideas, spiritual practices, you should be able to do continuously. The Nairantaryana means without any break, continuously. The continuity is very important. And it should be for a long time, Dirghakala. The Dirghakala is very important, means for a long time. So, that means it not necessarily in one life. Abhyasa, here sa means that, it refers to abhyasa mentioned in the previous sutra. So that abhyasa, the repetition, the practice, should be done for a long time without any interruption. And then you should have a sense of sanctity, a sense of sacredness, a sense of devotion towards that abhyasa. And then what happens? You become firmly grounded, established in that abhyasa. There are a few things to remember. One is, first of all, for a long time, Dirghakala. That is obvious, we already mentioned earlier. If we cannot really set a deadline, I shall practice meditation exactly for 30 minutes. I tell you, it's good for a beginner because he may not be able to sit for a long time, so he has to compel himself to sit at least for 30 minutes. It's good. But a person who really believes I shall stop meditation exactly at the end of 30 minutes, that person will not be able to really meditate, because every attempt to practice meditation really is an attempt to go beyond time. So if you are actually watching every minute, then you are actually meditating on time, not on the higher spiritual ideal. So that's why Dirghakala means you should not calculate. Calculation is a deadly enemy in spiritual life. A calculating mind can never achieve anything. Not anything, in fact. In art and science, let us say Einstein had planned to study physics for so many years and will do research only for so many hours in the laboratory. You won't become an Einstein, really. A great artist, like Da Vinci, Michelangelo, anybody for the matter, and all the great works, their great masterpieces in painting. Suppose they have decided we will do this only for so many hours, so many days, so many months. They won't be able to execute a masterpiece. They may be able to do some kind of a mediocre painting that you can sell for $100. That would be the great struggle. But a real masterpiece is the result of somebody somewhere going beyond time. Unless you transcend time, you cannot write a Crime and Punishment or a Brothers Karamazoo or anything that can be called a classic, either in drama or Chekhov's stories, Maupassant, anyone for the matter. Or even look at, if you read Walden, I'm not say as far as we can think of, you can find Thoreau was moving from place to place. as he thought, he wrote. But he was not calculating actually. So when you disconnect your mind from time, then mind actually takes off. Mind goes beyond mind itself, and then only a great art is produced in any area of the painting, music, or literature, wherever it is. Even as I meant in science, in Newton, suppose Newton, a very disciplined person, he will spend only so many hours for scientific work. He won't become a Newton, really speaking. I'm talking about those who are the epoch makers, those who made lasting contribution to either science or art. It means they disconnected themselves from time. So that applies here, Dirghakala. Nairantarya again is an art of disconnecting ourselves from time actually. Continuity, uninterrupted continuity. And then, but that is possible only satkara, means adradishaya, means you should have a sense of sanctity, sacredness. You should approach the yoga practice with great reverence. You call Siddha a sense of sanctity, sacredness. Then everything becomes easy. You can easily understand this. Anyone. After all the Vedas, including Yoga Sutras, all the great scriptures, all the great classical works, great scriptures, Vedas are being memorized by people who have made a rule in their families where children cannot have breakfast without first reading the Vedas. And they cannot read the Vedas without taking bath in cold water in the early morning. So you have to get up early in the morning, take bath in cold water, and then you should read the Vedas, and then only you can have breakfast. So, of course, it can become an absolute torture if you judge everything by modern standards. But if you have something to boast of, something to be proud of, it's all the result of a handful of great men and women who sacrificed their personal preferences, who practiced for long time without any interruption, Dirghakala, Nairantarya and Satkara, with a great Shraddha, with great adoration, with a worshipful attitude. You should not read the Vedas before taking bath, because Vedas are sacred. So the sanctity, external purity is linked to the purity or the sanctity of reading the Vedas. So you can see that even the physical. And what I mean to say, that's why he says a sense of sanctity and sacredness will help us to continue for a long time, because we won't consider it's a great drudgery. We won't consider it something unpleasant, something that is a violation of sense of enjoyment or anything. We won't feel that way, because we feel rather, if we don't take bath and read the Vedas, I have done some terrible crime and sin against God. Absolute, you can say it's a pure superstition. That's one way of approaching it. But what's wrong if you read Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which is kept in the library? Anyone can read it, and why should I take bath before reciting the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad or Vedas? Perfectly okay, no problem about it. That's true. Anyone can read it. But the point is, the ideal of external sanctity linked to the sanctity of the Vedas may be superstition. Well, I won't refute if somebody says, I won't argue with anyone who says it's a superstition. It is a superstition. But that superstition was based on this idea of sanctity and sacredness. And without a sense of sanctity and sacredness, they won't feel, these great ancient sages won't feel encouraged to give up everything, to sacrifice everything, to preserve this unique wealth of human civilization. So Shraddha or sanctity or sacredness, satkara, it's used in Patanjali Yoga Sutras. It helps us to practice something for a long time without interruption, even if that practice produces difficulties, even if the practice deprives us of many secular external benefits, still we will be able to bear all that because we look at this practice, meditation, whatever it is, as something sacred, as something sanctifying. That's why this sutra is often quoted, and is often quoted in many of the Gurukulas where they teach not only Yoga Sutras but Vedas and other holy scriptures also. Now we can have interaction. You are most welcome to ask questions. Thank you.
Maharaj.
Yeah.
Maharaj, in the end you were talking about superstition, right? So
Could you
when you have various matadipatis...
Wait, I want to tell you. Could you repeat the question again?
No, I haven't said the question. I was saying in the end you were talking about how there are certain activities which can be seen as superstition and certain activities which, as opposed to from the Jnana Marga, for example. Now,
please wait. Before you continue this, I want to make one point clear, because when I speak for a long time and then you ask the question. So first of all, I want to make one point clear. Now we are talking about the need to practice to take bath in the early morning before reading the Vedas and so on, which, to be very frank, I myself had to undergo that training. That's a background I'm coming from. So that's why I could feel. So now I remember as a small boy, people criticizing these, in fact. But when you go deeper into the dynamics of spirituality, of any tradition, any religion, you understand the so-called superstitions really are not superstitions. This is an important point, remember. So, first of all, you should know I am coming from an extremely orthodox traditional background, and what I said just now is something which is essentially part of my own background, family background. So, there are people, modern people, who tell you, you have a printed copy of the Vedas and kept in the library, which anyone can read. And people read. Max Muller read it, Paul Deussen read it, they were great devotees of the Vedas. Max Muller accidentally, though he didn't begin as a devotee, but when he started reading the Vedas, he became a lifelong student and devotee of the Vedas. Paul Deussen was always a great student of the Vedas. Now, the point is, if you say that they didn't take bath in the early morning before reading the Vedas, okay, can we say they did something wrong? Not at all. They did not do anything wrong. What I mean to say, many people in modern times may look upon these practices as superstitions. Many people in modern times may do that. That's what I implied. I don't say they are superstitions. Far from it. Rather, if you tell me they are superstitions, I would say they are not superstitions. I will tell you that. That's what I would tell you. What I mean to say, in modern times, many people will tell you that these external ritualistic practices are all superstitions. You should listen very carefully. But I said, but without those so-called superstitions, human civilization would not have been able to preserve this tradition. And that is true also in a different way, depending upon the climatical conditions. Maybe in Jewish tradition, where preserved the Torah and Talmud for thousands of years. So also in Christian tradition, in the monasteries, the Franciscan and the Dominican monasteries of medieval Europe, they preserved the biblical tradition. So you can find. So what I mean to say, of course, remember taking cold water bath in Germany or France or Italy is unthinkable. So their concept of sanctity will be different from what it could be in the hot tropical countries. But what I mean to say, there are people who may consider these as superstitions, that is it. But when you look at the whole thing, without this so-called superstition, which many modern people may call, they are not right, may call them superstitions, but without those so-called superstitions, we would have lost this precious spiritual heritage. That's what I said. So always remember, when you listen to a talk for a long time, then after when you ask the question, it's better to understand the statement and the context in which it was made. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj. I think that answers my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah.
Pranam,
Yeah.
I have two related questions.
Yeah.
First one is the will or volition or intention. I constantly use it every day, and that's one thing that I do not find in these 5 classes of vrittis. That's one question.
Once more, could you repeat the question once more? Volition.
Will, volition or intention.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be in any of these 5 classes of vrittis. And the second question.
Okay, I will answer this question, the next one, because otherwise I have to write down the next question. So the question number 1 I'll answer. First of all, now pramana vipirya vikalpa nidra and smriti. Now remember, our intentions, our relation, our will, our intention to do something, all are linked to memories. See, unless we remember certain things, we won't think of doing something for a definite purpose. We won't have a clear intention unless we link that intention to some of our previous experiences. This is an important thing to remember. Again, free will, even if free will is relatively free, how free it is, we don't know, because our natural tendency to do something for the first time, something we have not done in previously, that itself is linked to some of our previous experiences. We cannot think of doing anything without some link or connection to our own previous experiences. Without some link or connection, we can never have a will, intention, or idea of doing something in a vacuum. It is impossible. If you depend upon vacuum, there will be all impulses. Impulses, of course, impulses also have a background, but impulses may not have a clearly discernible antecedent, plan or theory or anything. But every action, everything, every intention has got some link to some of our previous experiences that we have undergone. Now please, next question. Most welcome. Next question. Yeah.
That explains. So I understand that every intention is preceded by a smriti, vritti.
Yeah, some will be connection may be there. Yeah.
Okay. And second question is somewhat related. It's mentioned, Nidra is mentioned, and you also I think mentioned Nidra includes both Sushupti and Swapna.
Yeah.
In Vedanta, not unlike in Vedanta,
Yeah.
in the yogas.
Yeah.
So if in a dream, Maharaj, I see, I misconceive, I have false impressions,
Yeah.
I even sleep in dream, and also sometimes in dream there is another dream. So all these 5 vrittis, all types of them are in the dream also.
Yeah.
how do we understand this? Is
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Dreams are actually replace of our waking state experiences at the mental level. That's all. See, we cannot have a dream without some connection to some experience we have had in the waking state. But it doesn't mean that waking state and dream state experiences are identical, not at all. So, of course, Vedanta scriptures tell you that there is a Desha Kala Saushmya Sthaulya Bheda. It means differences in terms of place, time, and gross subtle differences between waking state experiences and dream state experiences. In waking state, it takes 6 hours to 7 hours for you to reach New York, but in dream, 1 split second. Everything happens at the mental level. Again, you are going to sleep in one place, and dream you may think you reach some another place, like that location could be different. So, but in dream experiences, everything is subtle because senses are not directly involved. Only mind is involved. We see things, but our eyes are closed. We hear things in dream, but actually sound waves are not falling in our ears. We feel like smelling things in dreams, but you are actually sleeping in a room where there is absolutely no smell. Like that. So what I mean to say, in dream, everything happens at the mental level. It's called subtle. In waking state experiences, everything happens at the mental and also sensory level. Senses are involved. You're walking, for walking, your eyes are involved, you're seeing things, your feet are, your action, your senses of action involved, and also you need a mind also to think when you walk, which direction to recognize places and all that. So in waking state, mind is involved, senses are also involved, senses. But in dream, only mind is involved. So all dreams are nothing but replays or re-experiences of waking state experiences. There will be some connection always, but still that will be different. Please continue. Yeah, please. Next.
Those are the two questions. So I understand this. Even though Swapna or Nidra is one.
I was trying to, when I study the interpretations of Yoga Sutras, it becomes obvious to me that Patanjali's understanding of Nidra is not Susupti as we understand in Vedanta, of course not waking state, of course not dream actually. So Patanjali is talking, and it is real, it has been real. There is a state where you can see, suppose you are silently sitting somewhere, eyes completely closed, in a reverie, not deep sleep, not susupti, not waking state, you are not dreaming. If you hear, let's say, for the first time, a poem or a music or some recitation from nearby, if you hear that, you are more likely to remember that than what you may hear with eyes open in waking state. So what is that state? That state is what is called Nidra. That's what Patanjali is talking about. It's only conjecture, because it is obvious that Patanjali doesn't have in mind in either Susupti, waking state, dream state, or deep sleep state. So commentators sometimes they use the word Antarala Avastha. Antarala means in between. Avastha means state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very thoughtful questions. I much appreciate these questions. These questions make our classes discussion very lively and helpful.
Swamiji,
Yeah.
this is Sugata.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that
Yeah.
the sugar is sweet.
Ah.
And now you cannot. So if I say it is a superstition, right? Because I am saying it's almost a rule that I say that sugar is sweet.
Yeah.
But if other people can verify it, right?
Yeah.
Then they would not say it is a superstition,
No,
right?
Yeah,
So taking bath before meditation with cold water has helped me.
Yeah.
So I have verified that fact,
Yeah.
and I can say that for sure, at least for me, it helps.
Yeah. Really.
Right?
Yeah. For
So-
everyone. Yeah.
Because you woke up from the sleep and you are sleepy and you take cold water bath and you definitely feel much
Yeah.
fresh.
Yeah.
So whatever you do after that,
Yeah.
it would be much useful.
Yeah.
It will be helpful, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To concentrate and
Yeah.
do whatever studies you want to do.
Right.
So there is a logical,
Yeah.
logical steps. Reason for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be really superstition. If you make it a rule, then it looks like it is a superstition, but it is not really. It is
Yeah.
when you think about it a little bit.
Yeah, really, to be very frank, when I was I was taking these, not this class, but other scripture classes for the last 7 decades, so to speak. So I have come across people who are not fully convinced of the importance of these mechanical ritualistic practices before studying the Vedas or something. Okay. Now, the point is, so I had to accommodate every every conceivable category of people when I expound something. So I will have something even to the most ultra modern people, agnostic, who may not fully agree with some of these views, which he may consider to be somewhat orthodox. So that's why I extend my interpretation in both directions. Okay, in the one direction of extreme conservative orthodoxy, and other direction of modern ultra-modernism. So that's why I gave the example. There could be people who may consider these external ritualistic practices as bit superstitious, but even they will admit the practical benefit of many of these ideas. When I explain this, see, a child not allowed to have breakfast without studying the Vedas, listening to the Vedas, and not being allowed to listen to the Vedas without taking bath, and that too in the early morning, so that everything is linked to one after another. Now this may be considered to be a bit of a superstition, but when I explain this link, then they will be convinced of the efficacy. See, I take an example, and to be very frank, I have seen this happening in India. So I used to be invited to give some talks in some international yoga study centers, yoga sutras, and there were occasions when some of the prominent organizers told me, and many people from all over the world go to India to study Hatha Yoga, Yogasanas. So on the first day they give some instructions. You should have this mat, you should have all these requirements ready within 2-3 days and all that. Now, those who have taken long pains and spent a lot of money, maybe a long leave from their jobs, have gone to India to study Hatha Yoga, they will procure all these necessary items maybe within a day. But Indian students coming from nearby villages or nearby towns, they will take 1 week to procure all this. But somebody who will come from Australia, or maybe from, let us say, Canada, but beyond that, Scandinavia, will procure all the yoga mats, everything within a day. That why? Because they consider something much more important. They have traveled such a long distance. They have taken much more pains to go there to learn Hatha Yoga. In other words, they have paid a bigger price for that. For them, it's very important. So they won't waste a day for procuring all these items. But those who have come from neighboring towns, they may take, all right, Hindi chalta hai, chalega. Means it will happen in course of time. They may take 1 week to go and buy these things. So you can satkara. Satkara means adharadisya, means they're very particular. They consider they are so focused on this. Why? Because they have traveled long distances, taken long pains to go all the way and to study. So naturally they mean business, to use modern language. What do you say? Eh? So this happens at the human level, it happens. So that kind of intensity. Sri Ramakrishna speaks of the need for intensity. Intense devotion, whatever you do. That is possible only when you have this satkara asevido dridhabhumi. So dirghagala nairandarya satkara. For long time you have to practice without any interruption and with a sense of respect, honor, sense of sanctity and sacredness. So we can understand Patanjali Yoga Sutras if you connect the implications to our own times. Okay, that's the idea. So thank you for very wonderful questions. Okay.
Just note, Maharaj, tomorrow is International Day of Yoga.
Yeah, we had a program today. I had to speak this United Consciousness. They are celebrating this in a big way. Anyway, thank you for reminding. In fact, so it's good to remember that Patanjali wrote this wonderful work. Yeah. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
The recording has stopped.
Namaskar.
Thank you.
Namaskar.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.